Well, hello there. Good evening. Welcome to another Spitfire session. It's Steve Watts here, as tonight we focus on captaincy, joined by the current Kent captain and three former skippers this evening. As usual, we're on Facebook Live and on Zoom. We've got your advanced questions. Cheers for getting those over to us. And you can get involved while we're chatting, sending your questions in on Facebook via the comment section, and use the Q&A section if you're watching on Zoom. Tonight is the 10th Spitfire session that we have hosted. So thank you very much for your support. That's 10 hours of your life you're not getting back. But we do appreciate you watching. And thank you very much to Spitfire and to Shep-E-Neem, our terrific partners who continue to look after us during this barren cricket season. So let's crack on and introduce tonight's panel. I should say, by the way, as usual, the star question comes up at the end. Tonight it's a belter, and the sender will receive a crate of Shep-E-Neem beer. So let's get on and introduce the first of tonight's panelists, a captain of the county between 1999 and 2002, 219 first-class appearances between 1989 and 2002, 9,206 runs, 290 wickets, 314 List A matches, 6,000 plus runs, 377 wickets, and 11 ODIs for England since retiring as a player. This particular person has gone on to serve as president of the MCC. A very good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome Matthew Fleming. Hello to you.
Good evening. Hello.
Great to have you with us. Up next, another former captain here, making his second appearance on the Spitfire sessions. A man who spent his entire career at Kent and was captain between 2003 and 2005. 325 appearances between 1992 and 2006, a couple of trophies in the bag, 14,500 runs, 28 centuries, top score 208 not out against Somerset in 2001. And since hanging up the gloves, this person has gone on to forge a very successful career with Sky Sports. Hello again to David Fulton.
Hey, Steve. Evening, guys. Evening, everyone.
Now, next person to introduce to you here is a man who scored 19,500 first-class runs, 270 not out against Glamorgan in 2009, 221 for England against the West Indies at Lords in 2004, full international debut 2002, 15 tests in total, 5 ODIs and a T20, a Wisden Cricketer of the Year in 2005, 2 spells as captain, serving 9 years in total, and also a trophy in the bag here, the 2007 T20. It wasn't called the Blasting, was it? The T20 trophy, I think it was called back in those days. And this man, another person who's grabbed hold of the Sky Sports microphone since retiring. Good evening to Rob Key. Hello.
Is this the longest intro session in the history of intros? I mean, have we got any time left to chat?
Well, such were your achievements that your biography is
you still got to do billings, yeah.
Yeah, well,
that'll only be short.
Before we get on to billings, how are you, Rob Key? A couple of weeks ago, we were all very concerned after your hospital visit. You're looking pretty good.
Yeah, I'm all right. It's been an interesting month, put it that way, but everything seems to be going all right now.
Okay, as promised, let's introduce very briefly the current captain. Good evening, Sam Billings.
Evening. That's pretty fitting, to be fair. Evening.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me again.
No, well, thank you for joining us. I think for the third time, isn't it, this? And of course, obviously, your best days are yet to come. So if we do this in 10 years, your biography will be enormous as well. First question was sent in by Ian Brown. It's a good one. I'm going to fire it first, I think, at Matthew Fleming, if I may. Ian's question, did you have any hesitation about taking on the captaincy? Did you have to think about it? If you did, who did you seek advice from? Any real question marks for you, Matthew, about taking on the captaincy?
No, none at all. I was really lucky in that I'd always been passionate about leadership, and it was a real ambition of mine to captain Kent. So when the extraordinary honour and privilege was offered to me, I had absolutely no hesitation in accepting.
We had Chris Cowdrey on last week in our little Cowdrey Fest, and he made a very good point. Is when you look around the dressing room, you're looking for a new captain. there's usually only 2 or 3 candidates. Do you remember that being the case then?
Honestly, that was, Chris is probably absolutely right, but that didn't mean that there weren't more than 2 or 3 who wanted to do it, and maybe 1 or 2 who didn't want me to do it. So there was interesting. Move on, Steve.
Steve, I think what Jazz is trying to say is he wanted it from a young age. He had friends in high places. It was always going to be Fleming at one stage, and it wasn't universally popular within the dressing room. Personally, I was a big fan of Jazza as captain. But yeah, that would be fair.
I was in Bangladesh when it happened during my brief international career, and Ely, who was also on tour with me, who was certainly another candidate. I told him what had happened. I think I went to the gym and I came back and I found on the door a sign saying, "Kent captain, please knock and wait for Butler."
Did that happen to you, Dave Fulton, when you took over? Was the butler the messenger for you?
No, Jazza was the messenger. I mean, I had no aspirations to be Kent captain. It was an honour and a privilege, but I guess it only really came on the horizon after my 2001 season, where I'd captained junior sides all the way through. The fact I hadn't scored any runs for the first 8 or 9 years of my career meant the sack was always kind of round the corner. And that turned in 2001 when I had a very good season, and I think off the back of that it coincided with the fact that Jazza was coming towards the end of his career. And I think, unlike a lot of captaincy decisions when it can be kind of revolution, it was a very easy handing of the baton, because Jazza was on his way out. He had no insecurities about his own leadership, and he's just trying to keep some momentum that he had certainly established going. So it was an honour and a privilege, a bit of a surprise. But didn't have any hesitation whatsoever. And of course, we split it for that first year, which made that transition even easier, really. And people always said, well, how did that work? It worked incredibly well, I think, personally. You'll have to ask the rest of the players, but it worked well because Jazza made it easy for me.
You would have been around then, Kesey. Did it work really well?
Was that the year we won the one-day cup? Was that then, or was that the split captaincy year?
That was the season before. We won it 2001. We shared it in 2002.
No, I did. I remember, because Fultz is right, that Jazza was coming towards the end, so it was like a succession thing. And Dave, when he took it on, was excellent as captain in 4-day cricket. Jazza wasn't playing 4-day cricket anymore then, so there was no sort of issues in the dressing room with having 2 captains there. It was just, it was a pretty decent transition, and both were good captains. So it did work. It worked well.
When I was going through your biography, Rob, obviously you cut me short during it, but you did have 2 spells as captain. So how about then coming back for a second go? How easy a decision was that?
Well, captaincy is a funny thing. I think a lot of people want to be a captain until they actually do it. And there comes a time when you wish you didn't do it as long as what I did. I didn't like captaincy in the end because of my own batting form. Cricket's a game no matter what you do, you like winning, but you also like scoring runs if you're a batsman. And I wasn't doing that. So then the next year in the middle, when Treddy did it, he was off with England and things didn't quite go as well. He wasn't around much, Treddy. So then when I was they asked me to do it again, it was quite clear I thought we had to do it with young players. So like Bilbo coming through, Sam Northeast, all these guys. So that was like, it for me, the second time around, it was almost more interesting. Hence why I did it again, because I was always going to then pass it on to Northeast. And, hopefully they were going to go on to have a decent time of it, as they have done.
Did you enjoy it more second time around then?
No, not particularly. I enjoyed the man management side of things. I enjoyed the sort of trying to plan and trying to work out how you're going to set the next great era. That was what it was always about for me, was how do you create a great era of Kent cricket. That part was good fun, but I could never mix the two of my own game and being a batsman. I was a much better player when I wasn't captain, and ended up doing it for far too long, really. But I also I'm proud of, hanging in there when we got into a bit of a, rocky waters with financial issues and the crash in 2008 that hit us a bit. You know, and it was nice to see now them coming through the way they have done.
And what about you, Sam? When you took over, was it an easy decision for you?
It was a bit of a strange time. Obviously, Sam North East moved on, and I think there was a lot of change at that point in time. And kind of when you said earlier about there's only probably a couple of candidates at that point in time, we didn't have too many senior players who probably wanted the captaincy, but also would do a really good job, if I'm honest. So they decided to kind of give it to me, and again, I never really wanted, or it didn't set out when I was 15 years old to go, I want to captain Kent. That wasn't an ambition. It was always just to kind of play for England and play for Kent or whatever. So it's never been an ambition, but it's one that I've thoroughly enjoyed since I've taken it on. And maybe time will tell about performances, and hopefully I can continue the way I've kind of performed since I've had the captaincy. I feel as if it's actually helped my game to make sure I focus on giving myself enough time to really worry about my own game and try and kind of separate the two, really. So yeah, so far I've really enjoyed it. And as Keezy said, I'm very lucky that we've got a really good bunch of players at the moment.
And picking up on that point that you've just mentioned, Keezy alluded to it as well. Personal form, whilst being captain, there are a couple of questions about it that have been sent over. Dave Fulton, did you feel an added pressure? Did your own form suffer when you were leading the team?
Not especially. In 2002, when we split the captaincy, I quite enjoyed it, and I felt I could compartmentalise the two roles quite well. 2003, obviously the start of that season was when I had my eye injury, so that became a whole new challenge. And I was captain of one-day cricket as well. I was trying to come back from an injury I never fully recovered from, and one-day cricket wasn't my strongest suit. So I was really looking forward to that season. I felt I'd found my feet the previous couple of seasons in one-day cricket, and that potentially the next couple of years my opportunity to show what I could do. But it just took the edge off me as a player, and I felt that I probably battled from 2003 onwards to find my best form. And when you find, mainly because of my eye injury, and when you're not playing well, as Keezy alluded to, when you don't play very well, or you're struggling with the bat and you need to pour all your energy into just scoring runs, that can take a little bit away from your captaincy. And if you're distracted with things going on from a captaincy point of view, it can impact your form. So I would have loved to have the opportunity to be kind of fully fit and able to see properly and captain and bat. Never quite happened. So did it impact? I'm not so sure.
Matthew Fleming, do you remember any dips in personal form when you were captain?
If anything, I'm a bit like Sam. I think I probably played a little bit better when I was captain, and maybe my critics would say it's because I concentrated a little bit more when I was captain and understood that. If we take a step back, I mean, I'm very purpose driven, and I think in order to be a really good captain, you have to be purpose driven and understand that. One of the real goals of a captain is to help mould a team who share a purpose. And for me, it wasn't just on the pitch; it was off the pitch, helping to mould a culture, a club-wide culture that was purpose-driven. And so, actually, fitting my cricket into that became much more straightforward, because it helped provided a decision-making framework for me in everything I did, including on the pitch.
And how did you find that task of creating a club-wide culture which would take everything forward?
Well, I don't think, I mean, I didn't finish the job, but I hope I started it, and I'm sure Rob and I'm sure Dave and Rob and Sam have continued it. It's not straightforward creating or changing a culture, and you need people who believe alongside you and who also have the ambition to be part of an organisation with purpose. And I think some people got that quicker than others. Some people are never going to get it, but the evolution of a club is to help create a team and a squad and an organisation that has it. And if I'm entirely honest, my reason for retiring was I can pinpoint the moment I decided to retire, and that was in the changing room at Edgbaston, having won the Sunday League in 2001. And I looked around the changing room and I thought, does everybody here get it or not? And the answer was no, they didn't. And I knew I didn't have what it took to get the doubters to the place they needed to be, and it needed to be someone younger who had more energy and more time on their hands to do it.
I wonder if anyone ever really achieves that, though. I guess time will tell. Perhaps it's the unanswerable question. I did like this question sent in advance by Jamie Mead. There's a great chance for all of you to talk yourselves up here. Can you remember a game which looked certain to end in defeat, but due to your captaincy, you managed to turn it around and clinch victory? Keezy, this question is made for you. There must have been so many, surely.
I think it's hard to talk about yourself in that. So I'm going to talk about, I remember that year we won the Sunday League. Who was the game against Gloucester? That was that Inverarity when he gave his speech? Do you remember that? When the year we won it, when was that? 2001. 2001. I remember a coach, we got rolled for not many. And then John Inverarity gave some sort of bizarre speech, who never said much at all, John Inverarity as a coach. But he went on about a story in a game that he'd played and a miracle match that they'd won. And for some reason, we sort of went out, and I can't remember what we defended, but it didn't seem to be more than 120.
That's what it was, yeah.
And I remember those moments when Jazza would have been captain, when a coach, everything, just got belief out of a side that we probably wouldn't have had before. Who knows? You have to ask the players that I captain whether or not I did it myself. But that was one moment I remember a captain and a coach actually getting more out of a team than what we probably thought we would.
Game at Hampshire, you were captain. I think Carberry was opening the batting with Jimmy Adams, and they got off to an absolute flyer. And then we somehow kind of pegged it back. I think Keezy's being very modest, certainly. When I was kind of coming through the ranks.
Through it, Bilbo, can't we? We can see straight through it.
No, but
fake humility.
It's classic kick.
Randomly stand at silly point because he thought it would be quite funny. Like, no context whatsoever. And it was a rogue decision, and it somehow kind of paid off. But there were a couple of T20 games where certainly I think something that I've kind of learned from him is mixing up your bowlers and just the odd bowling change that really can swing a game of cricket. Kind of grabbing people when, as you said about doubters, and when people actually have kind of switched off because the game's won. Actually, when you get that little sniff, is to get the majority of guys back on side and back onto what needs to be done. I think that's a real skill that takes time to learn, I suppose. And like you said, you need the guys going in the same direction as you want to go in, basically.
T20 is the best game to captain for captains as such. You have more of an impact. Jazza and Falls probably didn't captain much in T20, would you? I wouldn't think.
I didn't play T20.
Every decision you make in T20, you know that next over whether it was right or not. In a 4-day game, every decision you make, I mean, unless you get a wicket when you bring a bowler on, you don't actually know if it's been the right decision, or it takes time to evolve. T20 is a game where captains have more impact than any other,
I think. If I was going to reflect on a game where I made a brilliant decision that won us the game, it was a Sunday League game against Sussex under floodlights at Hove, when I worked out I got my maths wrong and I ran out of bowlers. And we were defending 6 runs off the last over, and Michael Bevan was on strike. And I had to throw the ball to Walks. He was the only person who had it. And
the best one-day finisher in the world, bar none at that time, versus Matthew Walker.
And miraculously, didn't you catch Bevan on the boundary at deep mid-wicket?
Yeah, I was at deep mid-wicket. Will House, former Kent player, was on strike for a couple of balls. And then all of a sudden, Bevo had a heave at a couple, and they needed 4 off the last ball. And I was on the far-flung boundary, which would normally be a mistake because I couldn't throw it in that far. But given they needed 4 and couldn't run 3, got posted to deep mid-wicket. And he just picked me out 100 yards away, under a floodlight hiding. He just hit it straight down my throat, and that was the end of the day.
But I remember people afterwards saying, genuinely, that was a brilliant decision. What made you bring him?
You run out of bowlers, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm a master. Unbelievable.
There is a moment, Matthew Fleming, actually. It's not a captaincy decision, but I think the moment which has been discussed over the last 10 weeks, probably more than any other, is the 4 run-outs, which obviously hugely impacted a game, and your recollections of that.
Well, that was an extraordinary night because it was compounded by the fact it was under floodlights, and Canterbury under floodlights is an awesome experience. The ground was full. It was against Surrey. It's no greater pleasure than beating Surrey at anything, cricket or tiddlywink. And the miraculous thing was not so much hitting the stumps 4 times, because anyone can get lucky. And we all practice a fair bit, and any one of us would throw the ball in the general area. So there's a degree of luck involved in hitting 4 times, but the real luck is getting 4 opportunities. I mean, how often? Sometimes you go through a whole match and see one opportunity, but to get 4 in the space of 10 minutes was extraordinary, and it was just one of those magic nights. And I remember it with real fondness. It was everything worked out. My family was there. It was against Surrey. We won.
It
was on telly.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, my recollection of that, Steve, was as we were going out onto the field, I just had a quick word with Jazza, and I said, Jazz, I just got a good feeling about this. I think you could have some run-out opportunities. Just take a split second, take a breath, take aim, and it'll work out for you. But, that's my recollection of it. And
I think yours and mine are very different, Dave.
Is that not available on YouTube somewhere, that moment? Have you not uploaded it yourself?
It was once, and I remember looking, and it had 37 views.
It was playing to your benefit. You play your benefit functions quite a lot, if I remember. You've got to tape somewhere.
And I had a DVD made by Paul Box-Granger when I retired of my highlights, and so I've still got quite a lot of those left. If anyone's interested.
Did you ask for that yourself then?
Yeah, I said Box, because Box had a video production company, and I just wanted something, because I hadn't kept a diary or anything. I said, can you just get some highlights, because I want to be able to watch them when I'm old and now when I'm old and he got Ellie and Cal to do you're too young to remember, you lot, a Lass Smith and Jones.
I know that.
Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones used to do a conversation, and he got Ellie and Cal to do a conversation. It was very fun. Very fun.
Dave Thornton, finish up this question for us, will you? Were there any moments of genius from yourself as skipper, or from someone else that you remember that turned the game?
You always remember the good ones where you move you bring a bowler on, he gets a wicket straight away. You move a fielder. A couple of those against Surrey was, as I said, was always nice. I remember getting Alistair Brown the ball before lunch, just going into leg gully and telling Amjad we're going to set him up for a bouncer, try and pitch it up and nick him off. And he bowled him a leg stump half volley, and he clipped it straight to me at leg gully. Things like that are nice. I remember Mohammed Sammy, not sure whether bowling the 19th over or the 20th over of a one-day game against Gloucester, when they were 8 down but only needed a handful of runs to win. And normally you would bowl the strike bowler in the 19th, because if you don't, the game can be over. But obviously Canterbury is quite unique with its ends. Sags had 1 to bowl. He was only ever going to bowl from the pavilion end, really, so I had to hang on for Sammy in the 20th. He took two wickets in the 20th over and won the game. And a bit like Jazz, but sometimes by accident, it looks like a good decision. And I remember the opposite, when Essex had no right to tie a game. They needed something like 15 off the last over. I had Murali bowling, and I thought there's no way 9 down they're ever going to get anywhere near this against Murali. And Mohammed Akram, who could only just about hold the bat, hit 14 off the over to tie, And the last ball, he slog swept straight to mid-wicket. The only problem was that Walks was at mid-wicket, and it bounced 15 yards before him and went 2 inches over his outstretched arm. And they think I could have put anyone else at deep mid-wicket and won that game. And I had the shortest man in county cricket. And through no fault of his, we tied a game we should have won. So there's always swings and roundabouts.
Now, earlier on, before we started this webinar, is a word I absolutely despise, but before we started this webinar, it's horrible, isn't it? It's corporate speak. You were talking about Duncan Spencer. Matthew Fleming was talking about Duncan Spencer. I'll get his reminiscences on that in just a moment. But Dave Fulton, the man you just mentioned, Mohammed Sammy, how quick was he?
Yeah, he was pretty lively. I don't think he was as quick as Duncan Spencer, but yeah, Mohammed Sammy was sharp, and the standout performance was 16 wickets at the Moat against Notts, which included Kevin Peterson, and it was the flattest wicket going, and no one else looked like getting a wicket. He got 16 and bowled us to victory, and it was 2 different games. It was when everyone else bowled, and then Sammy came on for 4 or 5 overs, and the game changed. And just to have someone like that at your disposal was fantastic. To have a bowler with real pace. Probably him and Murali were the 2 standout bowlers that I had the privilege of captaining that could really turn a game. Captain some fine Kent bowlers, but those 2 could just change things in a heartbeat.
And Jazz, will talk about Duncan Spencer. What was it? 1993 was it? That Sunday League shootout, wasn't it, against Morgan?
Yeah, the last game of the Sunday League.
Yeah.
Winner takes all, huge crowd, Viv's last match. I mean, it was a really extraordinary day. And, I mean, history will tell you that Glamorgan won, but that's half the story. And Duncan bowled the speed of light at both Viv, Hugh Morris, Adrian Dale, Matthew Maynard, but he really shook Viv up. And a much more interesting bit of television on YouTube is Duncan bowling to Viv. And I still want to know where David Constant got the no ball from when actually Tav, you caught Viv, didn't you?
No, Duncan called it. He spliced it. Yeah, I was at square leg and I was just sauntering in to catch it. I heard the no ball and Duncan barged me out the way and called it himself because he was in the zone. He was probably,
But Steve,
he glazed eyes, but
he was properly quick, Duncan Spencer. But on the other hand, you got the feeling he would have been just as happy being a plumber. So he didn't have that. He didn't have that sort of that nastiness and toughness to make the most of his pace.
I actually went back and watched that YouTube footage of that match a week or 2 back. Is it Steve James or Adrian Dale facing him? He's not got a clue. The ball is through him before he's even thought of playing a shot.
Adrian Dale, and he was a pretty steady county number 3, Adrian Dale.
And Steve Marsh taking the ball up here somewhere. Absolutely phenomenal pace. This question is directed specifically at Rob Keeves from Irene and Barry Taylor. My husband Barry, this is not my husband, but my husband Barry today received Rob Keeves' new book.
Lucky Barry. Wow.
We're both looking forward to reading it. Could you please ask Rob Key what made him write the book? I'm stumped by that one. What made you write that?
Money probably is the honest answer.
Good answer. Very good answer.
Well, I didn't want
You've not got enough.
Biography. It's what I did think was that when they asked me to write a book, I thought, well, I wasn't a good enough player to write a book. But then what I thought, as these guys were talking about, I actually played with some of the best players, and I played with Murali, Steve Waugh, against Warne and all these people. So it's just some insight into them, really. Freddie Flintoff, people like that. And a few stories along the way about the dressing room. It's, I think in this day and age, everyone thinks you want scandal and gossip. There's not much of that in there at all. It's just a few stories about what we all went through, really, what went on in a county dressing room. And we were in a great era. Bilbo has missed out on this. And Jazza would have seen more of it, Fultz more of it than I did as well. Where we play, the overseas players in county cricket were fantastic. Dravid, all these guys, and that's what it's about, really. What they were like to play with.
Well, the correct title of the book is Oiki, Tales of a Journeyman Cricketer, which I think is very harsh on yourself. If I think of a journeyman in any sport, I'm thinking somebody who's been around loads of clubs, is pretty decent, but not that great. You were better than that, come on.
Don't pump his
Well,
tires
yeah.
up. It's just like
Oh, that's true, isn't it? It's true.
Just a
That's why his
player.
biography was so long. and it's
Anyone
not.
knows him. I mean, he knows how good he was, so it's fine.
Oi Key though was because I wasn't allowed to call it the full title. Oi Key was my Test debut, and Nasser, who's now my big mate, was the most intense man in the history of cricket. And I was standing at slip with Freddie, and we were sort of telling Stewie some stories. And Nasser, in the middle of an over when Ganguly's batting, this is just a name drop fest, but anyway, shouts over to me, "Oi Key, you fat expletive. I didn't put you there to chat to your fat effing mate all day, effing concentrate." And I don't think I've ever been as scared on a cricket pitch as that on my Test debut, and hence why the name Oi Key.
Yeah, how
Hence
did
why
you,
I can't
did
call
you
it,
get in the slips?
call it the last two. Well, this is
That's
what
okay.
England cricket was like then. You know, it was. I was saying this the other day on one of the things we were doing with Nasser, that 2 days before Fletcher goes round and he says, "Who does first slip?" And I'm thinking, surely you've got a first slip. And Fred goes, "Keezy will do it." And I remember thinking, you know, this is the England cricket team. It's not the dog and duck. You know, surely it's more prepared than this. Anyway, that's how I ended up at first slip, where I'd already been booted out there at Kent for dropping ball after. I couldn't concentrate. I used to begrudge having to watch every single ball at first slip. At mid-on, you could just sort of doze off and play a few holes of golf.
Standing next to Freddie will help you then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there we are. Oi Key. It's just been, I think it's been out about a month, hasn't it? I've just looked it up. It's £16.93 currently on
That's
Amazon.
gone up, actually. I thought it was only 12.
There we are.
What about you think, Steve? Wouldn't you you'd think if you played with him, there'd be a little copy through the post, you know, as a little kind of
you'd think,
pleasure. You think?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think he's charging us 20 quid, lads, if we want one. But
I do remember you've written a book, Dave. I can't see that in my vast.
You didn't put that on your shelf. No, I noticed that Oi Key's next to Freddie, which is appropriate.
Have you seen Shakespeare?
Shakespeare, yeah, as if. Absolute nonsense. That's just a book cover. There's nothing inside that.
Well, of course, there have been very low, quite a lot of low moments during this lockdown, but perhaps the lowest has been people broadcasting from home in front of bookshelves, which, of course, has been an unedifying spectacle, Rob. You've only got a very small one. This question is for Sam Billings from Jack Oliver. Talking about camaraderie that seems to be there amongst the current team, the current squad. Plenty of people are picking up on this, Sam. They've got a good vibe about what's coming.
Yeah, I hope so. And as Keezy pointed out, we haven't won anything yet. So
I said that off air. I didn't say that on this.
Yeah, absolutely. But I thought I'd get in there before one of you three would say it. So, no, it's a really exciting time to be involved at Kent. And I think you just see not only the players, but you see now Matthew Walker stepping up to international honours as well. The two guys in the Test team. We've got two guys in the England Lions and two under-19. So in terms of quality coming through and actually cultivating a culture that is kind of international level, it's something that we're really keen on. And as Jazza alluded to earlier, it's something that is really important. And I think you need a group of players going in the same direction to get the most out of each other. And we've got a really good bunch at the moment, and a very talented group as well. Sometimes you can have everyone who kind of gets on, but we've actually kind of got the ability, hopefully, to push on and win some trophies. We've not been far away, and a huge aspect of kind of all of the recruitment around domestic players and also overseas players has to kind of buy into this culture that we want to bring on, basically. Matthew Henry, even though his performance stood for themselves, absolutely encapsulates what we kind of stand for on and off the field. So, yeah, it's like I said, it's a really exciting place to be. And the next step is just to kick on and get some silverware. And I truly don't think we're far away. It's just a matter of kind of doing the things consistently well and holding each other accountable and keep getting better every single day. I know it sounds far easier, but it's been a really good time to reflect and kind of look at areas that we need to push on when we get the opportunity.
And I'm sure a proud time currently as well with the England representation, although strangely, of course, it's something that can count against you. But Joe Denley, yourself, of course, and Zach Crawley, what a highlight that was during the winter.
Absolutely. And we want to continue to produce England cricketers. Zach is absolutely, as Keezy knows, is a fantastic batsman, but also a brilliant young bloke as well. He absolutely sets the example on and off the field in terms of what he offers to the dressing room. And yeah, he's, like I said, sets a brilliant example, certainly for the younger guys, but also his peers. So it's great to see him move up the ranks, and Joe Denley saying that it was his kind of most proud moment for him, presenting his cap. That's absolutely everything. Why we play the game, I suppose.
Now, Dave Fulton, you're going to love this next question. It's been sent in by Paul Woodward, who may actually be you under another name. It says, Steve Ward described Dave as a courageous and having attitude as a captain. Aside from these traits, what other skills did you call upon to successfully manage players such as, and this is the name which has popped up, I think, more than any other apart from Jazz's 4 runouts, Andrew Simons? What are your memories of
Steve, are you there?
Captain Simons?
Yes. Yes, sorry, you just froze for a second there. I won't ask you to repeat it. You did actually just freeze. Paul Woodward was my old benefit chairman, so yeah, I know you well. Thanks for the question. Look, I didn't hear all of it, but I guess and I think there are 1 or 2 other questions that allude to players who were challenging. Simo had challenging moments, so I guess you had to be pretty straight and honest. I think they're qualities as a captain that you need, but you also at times need to be diplomatic as well. So Simo was a brilliant guy to have in your team, and I remember going on record and saying I wouldn't have swapped Andrew Simons for any overseas player that I played with, and that includes Murali and Rahul Dravid and Aravinda De Silva and Carl Hooper. There was a period where Andrew Simons could win a game with bat, ball, just sometimes with his sheer presence on a cricket field. But towards the end in 2004, he I think we saw it latterly in his Australian career. He did have 1 or 2 demons, and it became tougher to manage. With some of the lifestyle things that were going on and some of his relationships with 1 or 2 players. But so trying to navigate a way through that was tricky and challenging. So I guess you want to be honest with players. You want to be able to see all sides of different arguments. But by and large, he was a lot of fun to work with, and certainly a guy whose natural cricketing ability I had the utmost respect for.
Keezy, you said earlier you very much enjoyed the management side of captaincy. Anyone in particular that you really enjoyed being skipper of?
Enjoyed? I enjoyed most players, really. They were different in some way. There were some challenging ones along the way. I found Colesy. I mean, a lot of people talk about Matt Coles, but I had him young. You're much easier when you've got young players. Like Matt Coles, and when he was a bit older, so I quite enjoyed Colesy. I found it hard captaining, not captaining them, but people like Walks. When Dave, I had a year, my first year when Dave was captain, because they were your mates that you'd sort of not grown up with, but known a long time. So I found them not hard to deal with, because they were always very good as far as their attitudes and all of that. But if you had to leave out, I remember leaving out Matt Walker, that was horrendous. So things like that I found hard as a captain. But different people, when people were just popping in for the odd tournament, the T20 or something, Dougie Bollinger was hard work. Dougie Bollinger was a great bloke.
Oh.
But Dougie Bollinger was, slightly mad in a way that
Slightly.
He was so up and down.
Slightly.
Dougie would, 1 minute, he'd be buying me a present and saying, thanks for everything you've done. And the next minute he'd be swearing at me for making him bowl, so, but it's a tough one. I mean, in my time, there's no real difficult characters, I'd say, but captaining your mates was the hardest thing.
Would you agree with that, Matthew Fleming? Any particular challenges that you remember in the dressing room when you were skipper?
I mean, yeah, I think there are challenges in every dressing room, and I think no matter how fantastic the culture is now, I'm sure Sam would say that there are moments and individuals who can be more challenging than others. I mean, my greatest regret was, I guess, my greatest regret was the fact that I didn't get it right with someone like Trevor Ward, who was fantastically talented, but somehow towards the end that talent didn't match into performances, and it ended up with him leaving and going to Leicester. And I hated people leaving on bad terms with the club and with me. I guess the other person who was a challenge, actually, the hardest man to captain was actually the coach, in Wrighty. And the thing about Wrighty is he was he was a brilliant man. He was the guy who first made me think about purpose or articulate purpose. He was being brought up on All Black rugby and absolutely understood how important purpose was to All Black rugby. And in so many ways, he was a fantastic man for Kent County Cricket Club. But unfortunately, will always be judged on the fact that the top five couldn't get the ball off the square with any regularity, and that was one of his primary roles. So, that was as big a frustration as anything. The fact that Wrighty didn't fulfil his coaching potential with us at Kent, that wasn't easy.
Yeah, because can I just say that he moved on to coach India, obviously. So from trying to get Fulton Key, Smith to score runs, he went to Sachin Tendulkar, Ganguly, Dravid and co. He seemed to have no problem at all with them. It was just us. But
that was because he didn't try and make Dravid or Tendulkar bite the collar of their shoulder when they were taking guard.
Yeah, he did. He wanted us to score runs so badly. You desperately wanted to score runs, obviously, for yourself, but you wanted to score runs for Wrighty because you cared about the bloke, which was kind of part of the battle. But he almost cared too much. I remember once he got myself and Ed Smith down in the players' dining room underneath the dressing rooms, and he said, "Lads, I've been doing the stats, and both of you have almost identical dismissal stats." And we said, "Well, this is interesting, Wrighty. What have you found out?" And he said, "Well, do you realise that both of you get out 82% of the time, either LBW or caught behind the wicket?" And Ed and I are both looking at him, kind of nodding, thinking, "Well, this is good stuff. Yeah, brilliant. And what were your conclusions, Wrighty?" And he said, "Well, if you don't get out LBW or caught behind the wicket, you two are going to score a lot of runs." And with that, he got up and left. And it was a stroke of Wrighty genius that we hadn't worked out that, if we didn't get out, we'd score runs. Brilliant. But he was a lot of fun to work with.
So then the flip side to that is you have someone like John Inverarity, who was just do it. I don't care how you do it. You can bat left-handed or right-handed. You can hit it in the air or on the ground. Just give yourself the best chance and do it. And if you're successful...
Why did we all suddenly start scoring runs when John Inverarity came? Reasons that Wrighty had actually nailed a lot of the disciplines with us. All that then needed to happen was for us to be allowed, shackles off to go and play. And that's what Invers did. And Invers, without John Wright, we probably wouldn't have had those run-scoring seasons in 2001 and subsequent years that we had. But John took a lot of credit.
Absolutely, and the flip side to that is that Wrighty was a very successful batting coach in India, where people had already got their technical things sorted out, and he could work more on the mental side and building along it. Timing is so much of life and sport, and Invers got his timing better. Wrighty got his timing better with India than he did with Kent.
Yeah. But what I'm picking up from the two of you there is you're both suggesting that you need different types of coach at maybe different periods in any sports club's history.
Yes, but also a coach can do so much, Steve. But ultimately, it's not the coach that is responsible for your career. You, as a player, you are responsible for scoring your runs and taking your wickets. The coaches are catalysts, and the best ones certainly help, without a doubt. But you can't turn around and go, well, I would have had an England career, or I would have had this in my career, but for those, coaches. It's not how it works. You have to be your own best coach.
Okay, now you may have noticed while that very detailed answer was going on that Rob Key's disappeared. Technical difficulties, I understand. Not sure if he's rejoining us, but we have a question which has been sent in whilst we've been talking here from Parky, and it says, what is it in particular that keeps you, Sam Billings, or kept you, that playing for Kent? Were there opportunities to join other counties? Was it ever a temptation for you, Matthew Fleming?
Sorry, was that for Sam or for?
Well, we'll come to you on this one first. Any ever
right.
temptation to join anyone else? Was it even a thought?
So I am an institution. I'm institutionalized, and I've only ever had three jobs in my life: the army, Kent, family business. No. And what's even worse is no one tried to persuade me to join them. So put those two together, and there was never any chance of me leaving.
Would you have loved to have been flattered, maybe just to have been asked, even though you never?
Yeah, funny enough, I got rejected by Kent when I first tried to play cricket for Kent. I was the 8th best young all-rounder. That's why I went off to the army and spent 5 years in the army. And I also got rejected by Worcester, who signed Capel Dev instead of me. So life takes funny routes. But I was Kent through and through. But I would have loved to have been flattered.
Would you love to have been flattered, Dave Fulton? Maybe you were. I'm not sure.
No, I only scored runs in a couple of seasons, Steve. I think we've established that. So I did, when I was aware that I was very close to the sack, I think I'd had a phone call with Clive Rice at Notts, a phone call that was instigated by myself, because I always loved playing. You have some grounds that are your favourite grounds. I always seem to go quite well at Trent Bridge. It was a great place to bat. I'm a Forest fan for my sins, and I just always had this kind of thing. If I didn't play at Kent, then maybe Nottinghamshire is the place for me. And I was kind of out the team, and I worked out that I was quite a long way down the pecking order. So I think you do tend to look around. I never had an agent, so I picked up the phone, and I don't think Clive Rice had ever heard of me. And he said, "Sorry, Dave, we're going to go with John Morris. But thanks for your phone call. I watched your career with interest." And that was as close as I've ever got, which was not very close at all. And it was just an inquiry to see whether anyone might be interested, and I found that out quite quickly. It was a no.
It seems almost unfair to throw this at you, Sam Billings, this question, but just to say, you're very content, aren't you, where you are? You've been captain for many years. There's no other answer for you here, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dave's probably your agent, isn't he?
No, I don't do that anymore, Jazza.
Oh, sorry, I'm out of the loop.
I don't do anything anymore, actually, in this pandemic, but that's a different story. If I've got any strawberries that need picking, I'm your man. Carry on, Stan.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? In terms of Kent now, there's no other place I'd rather play my cricket. At one point, when I went off to university, I was not even contracted at Kent, academy contracted, and had Paul Dixie, Geraint Jones in front of me, and Geraint Jones still had plenty of time left in his career. So went off to university, got 100 against Northants on first class debut, and then that's when other counties, being up at Loughborough, Notts actually, I was not close, but certainly had conversations with other counties, and thankfully Kent swooped in and gave me a summer contract. So the rest is kind of history. But that was the only time that I think whenever there's that amount of competition in one spot as well, being a wicket keeper, you have to look at options. But thankfully, not since then.
Oh, I love this question, which has been sent in whilst we've been chatting here. It doesn't have a name on it, but it says, who's the one player you captained that you thought should have had international honours and never did? Matthew Fleming, can you think of some names that you had in your team? You thought perhaps unlucky not to
I think we were talking about the quality of person and quality of bowler, quality of cricketer as being very important to me. I keep thinking of people like, if someone like Julian Thompson, who for a year and a half was one of the best bowlers in county cricket, and certainly one of the most decent men in county cricket. That would have been absolutely fantastic. I think we were talking about John Wright's legacy. You think Rob Key went on to play for England, Ed Smith went on to play for England, and Dave flipping well should have played for England, but things conspired against it. So there's luck plays a huge part. We had some fantastically talented, but I mean, Neil Taylor, Mark Benson only played 1 or 2 games of cricket for England. I mean, brilliant players. Lots of them could have played for England.
Dave, do you remember anyone from your era as captain you thought maybe should have got international honours that missed out?
A lot of them did. I mean, Jazza mentioned obviously Kesey and Ed Smith, and played with the likes of Jazza and Ely and these guys that probably didn't have the longevity of England career, but at least did get to grace the highest level. I was delighted that Martin Saggers got a little run out. A similar, you almost put him in the Julian Thompson bracket of someone that looked like he was just going to miss out, but had been a tremendous servant for Kent for a number of years. But he got to show what he could do. Terrific servant. I mean, in terms of raw talent, you wouldn't have looked past Walks. If Walks had achieved 5 years earlier in his career what he did from 2001 onwards. He was England under-19 captain. He seemed to be destined for international honours. He was certainly talented enough. And he's probably been on here talking about reasons why it never happened. Maybe lifestyle, maybe living 3 or 4 years in my house probably didn't help as men behaving badly in the late 90s. But he had all the ability. Look, there was most of the top guys that I played with at Kent did at least have England careers, albeit short ones.
And to bring this up to date, Sam, this question, I find it astonishing when I think back that Darrin Stephens has not represented England in white ball cricket. I find it amazing.
Yeah, he's the obvious answer, and probably the only answer that I can give at this point in time. But
he hasn't retired for international cricket, though, has he? I mean, it is still, he's got another good 5 or 6 years in him.
45 next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's older than me, isn't he?
It's remarkable.
He's older than you. No, he's not older than you. I've seen his kind of cricket 35 plus. So I think similarly, as Dave said about Walksy, if that kind of form had, and certainly with his bowling, he didn't start bowling till after the age of 30. Kind of the all-round package that he's become has been astonishing. So again, it's just a timing thing. You look at how people get their breaks in different points in time, but yeah, he just missed the ball. But by far the most talented player that I've played with, some of the knocks. I mean, I had the best seat in the house for that 200 last year. It was utterly ridiculous at the age of 43. So, yeah. It sounds ridiculous just talking about it now. 43 and you get a double 100 in a session and a half at Yorkshire, who are just behind Surrey in terms of people who you like to beat. So it was incredible viewing. Steve, can I just say, Darrin Stephens, I forgot I played with him, even though I shouldn't have done. But he was my best signing as captain of Kent, and one of the ones I absolutely cling on to as absolutely fantastic when he came over, and I've obviously followed his career, as all Kent fans have since then, and thrilled that he's been such a success for Kent. But yeah, should have played for England.
There can't be many players who haven't played with Darrin Stephens, surely. Jazzy, you must have played with him.
Played against him a lot.
Against him, yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. It is. It's extraordinary. It really is. We're going to move on to the star question in just a moment. Just want to throw this one in quickly if I can, which was sent in by Richard. If you could invite a legend of sport around for dinner, any sport this is, who would you choose and why, Dave Fulton?
I thought about this, and I would go for someone like a Tiger Woods or a Lance Armstrong, just simply because whilst they've been the best at their sport, particularly Woods, obviously he's got some quite interesting stories to tell away from the sporting arena, and they are flawed characters for all their sporting genius. And I think that would make more interesting stories at a dinner table. I think all of us are flawed in some ways, and I think they would be fascinating.
There's no one more interesting, is there, than the genius who's the flawed character, and then who comes back, such as Tiger Woods did at the Masters last year, or whatever it was.
Yeah, and he might be able, I don't think he'd be able to do much of my golf swing, to be honest, but I'd certainly be asking for a tip or two.
Matthew Fleming, sporting legend you'd love to have around for dinner?
He's a sporting legend in my house. Charles Leslie, my great-grandfather, played cricket for England in the 1880s, hit an all-round 7 at Lord's. I'd like to know I'd just like to meet him.
Very good answer. Best answer I think we've had in 10 weeks.
Yeah, don't bother asking me. Steve.
Well, you answered this a couple of weeks ago, talking about some program on Netflix. When I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah, I mean, The Last Dance. If
That's it.
you
Yeah.
still haven't watched The Last Dance, Steve, I'm disappointed in you.
I haven't. I don't know how to work Netflix, and I'm not paying for it. Like I'm not paying £16.93 for Rob Key's book either. Wait for that to drop. Go in the old bargain basket. This is the start question, which actually Matthew Fleming selected. So we'll come to you last, if we may, on this one. Sent in by Jeremy Preston. And this is from a supporter's perspective. Bear with me on this question. From a supporter's perspective, the engagement and camaraderie of the present team is obvious. We mentioned it earlier. Whilst the relative lack of trophies achieved over the past 30 years, especially given the quality of players available, indicative of a lack of the right type of culture within the club. This question covers areas we've talked about at various points tonight. If you can bring it into one whole, Dave Fortin, how would you answer that?
Well, it's a good question. It's a really tough question. I mean, Jazza, I thought, spoke beautifully on the kind of the question of purpose and culture. And certainly his handing of the baton over to me, I tried to build on what he had achieved because I thought it was a real step in the right direction. I had a lot of time for Steve Marsh and his captaincy, but Jazza definitely took the reins and tried to shift the whole club into having not just the players, but the coaches, the ground staff, the stewards, with this kind of this one club mentality that we were going to stand for something. And that's something I really believed in too. But a bit like Jazza, when I resigned the captaincy, I wrote a letter to everyone at the club, from stewards to coaches to fellow players, because I felt it was a fight that I couldn't win either. So my frustration was that you wanted so much for everyone to buy into this kind of common purpose. And I think watching from the sidelines now as a Kent fan and knowing a lot of the guys that I do, I definitely think it's starting to happen. And that Jazz was to some extent ahead of his time, but I think we're seeing these things happen now, and that's what's so exciting. So was it a question of culture? I'm not sure. I think we've been so successful in the 70s. We lost a few close finals in the 80s, and I think that group of players didn't quite know how to win. And it was best summed up for me in 1995 when we won the Sunday League. And we won it. I'll be brief here, but I played in that game, and I hadn't played in many games that year. The last game, we had to beat Warwickshire at Canterbury to win. And there was a lot of rain forecast, and the only other team that could beat us was Worcester, and they were playing at home against whoever. And all we had to do was go and win our game. And a lot of our senior players were looking out the window, waiting for it to rain, hoping it would rain, praying it would rain. We had Mark Benson as captain, who was part of that era, who was a fine player and a good captain, wanting the weather forecast check. And all we had to do was go and win that game and focus on winning. We were concerned with so many extra things that just we didn't need to be. It kind of summed it up for me, that generation, why we didn't kind of win. We just weren't used to winning, and I think losing had become a bit of a habit.
And Matthew Fleming, you chose this particularly as the star question. When we've had Spitfire sessions the last few weeks, we've been back to the 80s, we've been back to the 90s, and we've mentioned this succession of finals which were not victorious for Kent. It was a real mixed bag of responses, some saying, well, we weren't meant to be, and others with real regret. How did you read those times?
So it's probably a combination of all the above. I do think purpose is really important, and it is easier to fulfill your potential and be good as individuals and a team if you're giving rather than taking. And I don't think that on the pitch or off the pitch, and that I include administrators and players in this, I don't think we were ever truly understood the fact that we were custodians. And it wasn't about us, it was about the club. And I think if the players had more of that, then maybe we would have been better. But I also think the club didn't deserve it, because I don't think the administrators understood that the club needed to have purpose off the pitch as well as on the pitch. So I think there was a cultural failing, but I also think not winning breeds not winning. And to Dave's point, we absolutely had the talent. I mean, look at, we didn't talk about Neil Taylor not playing for England. Neil Taylor scored. He was a run machine. Carl Hooper was an absolute run machine, but ultimately, was he a great? No, he wasn't. He had the talent to be, but he never coped with not being Brian Lara. We had so many good players, and it must be something to do with culture. The fact that we didn't win more, and that would be a real regret for all of us as players. And some of it's our fault, and some of it's not our fault.
I've got some good news for you, Sam Billings. You don't have to answer this question because it's about the past, and you are very much the present. But you want to chip in with a last thought?
I'd just like to, listening to those two guys there, it kind of really hammers home that we've got a great opportunity, and you can't waste an opportunity, as your careers do pass you by pretty quickly. And your point about how the off-field mirrors the on-field, we've got a fantastic off-field staff at the moment, and a team that works tirelessly. And the whole focus has been this one club driving forward on and off the field and supporting everyone. And we're only as good as the people off the field as well. Even though we are the shop forefront, it's really important. And I think, just to add, we've got an opportunity that we kind of really need to make the most out of. And thankfully, I truly believe we've got a group of players that understand that on the whole, but also want to really drive it forward. So, Jazza, when we do have a pre-season, you can come and chat to the boys. That would be great.
Oh, they'll love that. There's a brilliant story about President Kennedy visiting NASA and finding a humble...
Not Hussein, not Nasser Hussein. Just to
visiting NASA as in the Space Center, and finding a humble janitor sweeping a floor. And President Kennedy is rumoured to have said to him, "And what do you do, my man?" And he said, "I help put people on the moon." And that is the culture that we never managed to achieve at Kent County Cricket Club, or we started to get closer to it in the 2000s, and these guys have built on it fantastically. But every single person at Kent County Cricket Club has a really important role to play in Kent winning and being successful.
And that story about NASA has currently been made into an advert, isn't it? And it really is very powerful, I have to say. There's an awful lot of chief executives, MDs, who could learn an awful lot. I'm going to say no more from that advert. The bell has rung, gentlemen. Time has beaten us. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Jeremy Preston, for sending in the star question, courtesy of Shepherd Neves Spitfire. You will win some beer from our fabulous partners. Keep your eyes on Kent's website and also the social channels for more details of more online interactions. In the meantime, thank you very much, Sam Billings, for joining us for a third time. Lovely to see you again. Hopefully see you in the flesh sometime soon.
Absolutely, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Dave Fulton, second time on the Spitfire sessions for you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And thanks to Barry Dyer as well for having a word and getting us back on. It's great to hear from Barry.
Oh, he got onto you about, he's been on at me all week about, can you please say thanks to Barry? Can you please say, it's Barry's also he's guessing, please say thanks to Barry. So well done, you beat me to it. And Matthew Fleming, thank you very much for joining us. You said earlier you're institutionalised. So how have you found lockdown as an institutionalised person?
I live in the middle of Norfolk, and I've had my family back at home with me, and I've had an unbelievably lovely lockdown, which is incredibly unfair on all those people who haven't. And that is one of the real challenges that we face. And I noticed you didn't say that this was my first appearance on the Spitfire sessions, but I also noticed you didn't say it was my last appearance on the Spitfire sessions. So as an optimist, I'm leaving here hopeful that I may get re-engaged.
Well, we are running very low on guests, so you may well be.
Yeah, don't hold it.
I also need to say thank you very much to Rob Key, who decided after about 40 minutes he'd had enough.
Yeah, you've gone to flog some books, Steve.
Here's a pen. Can you sign this for me? It's called Oi Key, and it's currently priced on Amazon at £16.93.
Too much. It's too much, isn't it? Too much.
Got to come down. Down. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good pictures.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening on another Spitfire session.